4 weeks before I do, she opened her own bedroom door and found her fiancé and her sister naked between sheets bought with her money. 5 years later, at the Met Gala, beneath crystal chandeliers, the betrayed bride returned, and the billion-dollar contract just turned to ashes. The ring she never wore now shines on the finger of the woman who decides their fate. The smell of new wax and the promise of a newly built home hung in my Boston house, an idyllic setting that would become the epicenter of my ruin. I am Eliza. I was at the height of my ambition, balancing a promising career in financial consulting with the detailed plans for my wedding. My fiancé, Daniel, a fast-rising lawyer, seemed like the missing piece. I loved him, and more than that, I trusted him. And I trusted my sister, Vanessa. Vanessa was the antithesis of my world. While I valued effort and substance, Vanessa lived for surface, for envy, and for external validation. She was beautiful, magnetic, and as I would discover in minutes, fatally toxic. She didn't just want my dress or my shoes, she wanted my life. Or at least what she believed my life represented. The tranquil scene was broken on an autumn afternoon, 4 weeks before my wedding. I arrived home early, parchment paper, wedding invitations in hand, eager to share the excitement with Daniel. The door was slightly ajar. A strange, heavy silence hung in the air. I heard muffled laughter coming from the master bedroom. Laughter that didn't just belong to Daniel. It was complicit laughter. My heart began to pound against my ribs with the force of a hammer. I pushed the door open, and the scene hit me like an electric shock. Daniel and Vanessa were there, together, stripped of decency and loyalty. My fiancé and my sister. My whole life collapsed in seconds. The pain wasn't just the sight. It was the confirmation of betrayal in its cruelest form. Daniel tried to react, stumbling to cover himself, his face pale and full of pathetic guilt. "Eliza, it's not what you think. You weren't supposed to be back now." His voice was a weak lament. I ignored him. My gaze was fixed on Vanessa. She wasn't ashamed. She was sitting on my bed, wrapped in the sheet we had bought together, and gave me the coldest, most triumphant smile I had ever seen. "Oh, Eliza, what a shame," Vanessa said, her voice mellifluous and full of scorn. "He wasn't going to tell you, but since you're here," she gestured toward Daniel. "You weren't using him right. He chose me, and you always knew I deserved more. He gives me the attention you don't have time to give, focused only on your business reports." Vanessa's poison was absolute. Then Daniel joined the betrayal, his voice recovering a defensive tone. "She's right, Eliza. You're too ambitious. You're cold. I'm not a trophy for your career. Vanessa understands me better." The pain hit me, not because of Daniel. He was irrelevant, proof of my poor judgment of character. The pain was because of the family betrayal, the loss of my safe harbor. The tears came, but I swallowed them, transforming them into a cold, sharp energy. I would not give them the spectacle of my collapse. I walked to the dresser, picked up the engagement ring that was in its velvet box, and threw it with all my strength against Daniel's chest. The diamond and gold fell to the floor, making a hollow, final sound. No. I will not scream. I will not beg. I am not a victim. You wanted my attention. You will have my silence. I will not seek revenge. I will build a success so gigantic that your lives will become irrelevant. You will see what it is to truly lose something. I didn't say a word. I grabbed my purse, my car keys, and left that house. I left behind the invitations, the ring, and the pain. I was broken, but not defeated. That night, I drove south, not to the office, but to a new beginning. I called my assistant, instructing him to liquidate all my assets in Boston and transfer me to the company's new branch in Seattle. Daniel and Vanessa married 6 months later. In a rushed, quiet ceremony, They thought they had won. They thought I had vanished in disgrace. But I made a pact of silence. I would never speak about them, never interfere in their lives, and never seek payback. I would build a life that by its existence would be the sweetest and most implacable revenge fate could ever serve. Time does not heal all wounds, but it turns them into scars of steel. For Eliza, the pain of Vanessa and Daniel's betrayal was channeled, not into resentment, but into ambition. The stolen wedding became the spark that ignited her career. I didn't look back. I sold what was left in Boston and moved to Seattle, a new and unforgiving city that welcomed me with its promises of innovation. The betrayed heroine vanished. In her place, a financial consultant of iron will was born. I channeled every frustration, every unshed tear into reports, market analyses, and acquisitions. My rise was meteoric. I was always prepared, unsurpassed in focus and determination. In less than 3 years, I left senior consulting to found my own firm, Ithel Consult. The name, Ithel, meant noble in Old English, a silent reminder of the dignity I had promised myself to restore. Ithel Consult quickly became the top choice for high-stakes mergers and acquisitions, known for its cold approach and guaranteed results. My financial success was my only therapy. I lived and breathed numbers. My luxury apartment was minimalist. I allowed myself very few pleasures other than the satisfaction of closing a deal. I had become cold, focused, and intentionally avoided serious relationships. I feared vulnerability, and love had become an unquantifiable risk in my life equation. I kept myself informed about Vanessa and Daniel's failed marriage only to ensure they remained irrelevant, but the focus was on my own empire. Fate, however, had other plans. Ithel Consult was hired by one of the largest real estate and infrastructure holdings in the United States, Thorn Holdings, to manage a complex acquisition. It was there that I met Alexander Thorn. Alexander was not a Daniel. He was 10 years older, with an imposing presence and a reputation for integrity rarely seen at that level of wealth. The respect between us was immediate. He was not intimidated by my ambition. He admired it. Our connection was born not out of blind passion, but out of mutual intelligence and an unwavering work ethic. He was the CEO I aspired to be, powerful yet fair. The partnership deepened. He saw me as Eliza, the brilliant CEO, and I saw him as the safe harbor I thought I had lost. He respected my past pain, though I never detailed the family betrayal. A year later, Alexander asked me to marry him. I hesitated, afraid of vulnerability, but he had taught me that true love does not demand the sacrifice of the self. Our wedding was secret and discreet, on a secluded beach in Hawaii, without the presence of the media or any member of my toxic family. I became Mrs. Thorne, but I kept the name Eliza in the corporate world to protect Ithel Consult and maintain my own identity of success. The surname Thorne was my last power card, a card I kept in my pocket for the improbable chance of having to return to my past. And I was about to discover that fate had scheduled the rematch.
5 years had passed since the betrayal, and while Eliza's life was built on pillars of steel and power, Vanessa and Daniel's was crumbling under the weight of their own superficiality. Fate had given them what they asked for, the marriage, but had taken away what they truly needed, substance and character. Vanessa and Daniel's marriage was a silent, bitter decline. Daniel, the charming lawyer, proved too weak to sustain the level of life Vanessa demanded. His success stagnated. He was a mediocre lawyer, trapped in a mid-sized firm, constantly complaining about the lack of big clients. Their house, which once seemed like a stolen love nest, was now a battlefield. Financial fights were constant and cruel. Vanessa blamed Daniel for his lack of ambition. Daniel blamed Vanessa for her insatiable greed. Love, if it ever existed, had turned into mutual resentment. They were stuck with each other by a mortgage and the shame of admitting failure. Vanessa, trapped in a life of mediocrity, intensified her social media illusion. She posted photos of expensive dinners, paid for on credit, and fake trips, maintaining a facade of success that was becoming increasingly expensive to sustain. Behind the photos, she was desperate. Their last hope resided in Thomas, a college friend of Daniel's who had become a promising tech entrepreneur. Thomas needed massive capital for a $1 billion contract, and he used Daniel and Vanessa as potential intermediaries to access major investors, offering them a fat percentage as payment. Thomas's contract depended on the approval of a single colossal investor, Thorn Holdings. Vanessa learned this and saw a golden opportunity to rescue her life from frustration. She manipulated Daniel, insisting they had to expose themselves using Thomas's charm and connection to beg for the holdings' capital. The stage for the do-or-die negotiation was the most exclusive charity event of the year, the Metropolitan Museum of Art Benefit Gala in New York. It was the place where big deals were socially sealed. Vanessa knew that. Dressed in an expensive rental and with a forced smile on her face, she and Daniel would have to attend to plead for the attention of Alexander Thorn, the invisible CEO. They were preparing for the most important night of their lives, unaware that they were walking into the execution room for their own sentence. That same week, in their luxury New York penthouse, Eliza and Alexander Thorn received the golden invitations to the event. Eliza, Alexander said, his voice calm and deep. As co-sponsors, we'll have to smile a lot. You and Ethel Consult are the main attraction tonight. Eliza held the invitation, feeling a strange pang of inevitability. She had promised herself they would be irrelevant, but fate was dragging them back to her stage. She smiled at Alexander, the thorn diamond glittering on her finger. I'm going back into the game, and this time, the game will be mine. The night at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a spectacle of discreet wealth and absolute power. The ancient halls, filled with priceless works of art, served as the backdrop for the real New York game. For Vanessa and Daniel, it was their last hope. For Eliza and Alexander Thorn, it was just another evening. Eliza was ready. Her attire did not scream wealth, it whispered it. A clean-cut, deep-colored couture gown that evoked tranquility and control. She wore no excessive jewelry, her neck was bare, her power was innate. The only ostentatious and significant piece was the thorn wedding ring, a diamond cut with the precision of a laser beam that sparkled on her ring finger, a beacon of her new status. As Alexander waited for her in the foyer, Eliza looked in the mirror. The face was no longer that of the betrayed girl from Boston. It was the image of a CEO who had built an empire from the ashes. She knew she was going back into the game, not as a player, but as the owner of the chessboard. Eliza and Alexander entered the main ballroom arm in arm. Their entrance was not thunderous, but it caused a pause in the social murmur. Alexander, with his stature and presence, was the personification of silent authority. As they headed toward the sponsors area, Eliza's gaze caught a pair of figures desperately trying to look comfortable near the champagne table. It was Vanessa and Daniel. Vanessa was dressed in an expensive rental, the fabric overly shiny and her hair exaggeratedly styled, a clear attempt to compete with the wealth she did not possess. Daniel looked sweaty and uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, following Vanessa like an unhappy shadow. They were there with Thomas, the tech entrepreneur, desperate to make the connection that would save their future. Vanessa was laughing loudly at some superficial joke of Thomas's when her gaze, by chance, swept across the ballroom and met mine. The effect was dramatic. Vanessa's forced smile crumbled, wilting on her face in a second. She froze. The champagne in her glass stopped bubbling. Her face, previously made up for success, turned pale and corpse-like, revealing the tension and misery beneath the facade. Her eyes widened, fixed on me, but mainly on my escort, and even more so on the thorn diamond on my finger. It can't be. Eliza! The girl I humiliated. She's here, and she's with... who? My God! Her clothes, that ring, her posture... She looks like she owns everything. She didn't disappear. She became what I pretended to be. Daniel, who was focused on trying to steal Thomas's attention, looked up. He saw Eliza, and his reaction was of abject terror. He staggered, his whiskey glass swaying dangerously. The 5 years of guilt, mixed with his current mediocrity, hit him full force. Despite the shock, Vanessa's sick ambition spoke louder. She knew she needed the Thorn surname. She dragged Daniel and Thomas, forcing the confrontation, the mask of superiority returning, though trembling. She approached, her face still pale. Eliza, my God, it's you. What a surprise. You look well. Who was your escort? I smiled. A cold and deadly smile that did not reach my eyes. The game was about to begin, and I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Revenge would be served on the New York stage. Approaching, Vanessa forced a frantic smile, desperately trying to regain control of the narrative. Daniel stood behind her, visibly trembling. The tech entrepreneur, Thomas, watched the scene with professional curiosity. Eliza, how marvelous to see you, Vanessa exclaimed, moving in for a hug that I subtly avoided with a shift of my body. Who is the gentleman? You look so well. I didn't know you were back in New York. What do you do now? Still at that tiny consulting firm? I wasted no time on sentimentality. My smile was polished ice. I looked at Alexander, then back at Vanessa. Vanessa, Daniel, this is my husband, Alexander Thorn. The effect was instant and devastating. The air seemed to thin for Vanessa. The name Thorn, the name of the reclusive magnate and holding CEO who controlled billions in capital and whom she was there to beg, left my mouth like a death sentence. Thorn. No, it can't be. The Alexander Thorn, the one they said was the co-sponsor? The intern I humiliated married him? The contract, our contract, depends on Thorn Holdings. I scoffed at her life, and now her life is holding ours? Vanessa's face lost any residual color, turning literally pale beneath the heavy layer of makeup. Daniel, who was trying to brush champagne off his tuxedo, choked. The Thorn? Daniel managed to stammer. You are the CEO of Thorn Holdings? Alexander, always imposing, shook Daniel's hand with a firmness that was almost threatening. I am, yes. And Eliza is not just my wife. She is the founder of Aethel Consult, the firm that restructures my assets. The inclusion of my name and professional status was a double blow. Vanessa, at the height of desperation and manipulation, tried to play her last card, the sentimental one. She grabbed my hand with an urgency that disgusted me, ignoring the thorn ring. Eliza, my dearest sister, you won't believe it. Fate. This is fate bringing us back together. Thomas,
She pushed the entrepreneur forward. Has a brilliant deal, Alexander, and it's a perfect fit for Thorn Holdings. Thomas was just telling me he needs your approval, Alexander. What a divine coincidence. You can help us, Eliza, for the sake of family ties, for our sisterhood. Her appeal was pathetic. She was trying to bribe my ego, pretending that the betrayal 5 years ago was just a teenage squabble. Alexander, whom I had carefully briefed on the exact nature of the betrayal, maintained an impressive professional coldness. He didn't smile or show emotion. He looked at Daniel, ignoring Vanessa's pleading hand. "Mr. Daniel," Alexander said, using the tone of a corporate inquisitor. Mr. Thomas briefly explained the technology model. Before we consider capital, I need guarantees of integrity and managerial competence. The project is sound, but the execution depends on your team lead. Alexander asked a complex technical question about the legal contingency plan, something only a high-caliber lawyer could answer. Daniel, a mediocre and now panicked lawyer, stammered, unable to formulate a coherent response. He was too focused on my diamond and my husband to remember the law. I watched the scene with silent contempt. Alexander's weapon was intelligence. Mine was irony. Vanessa tried to interrupt, attempting to save her fiancé/husband, but I cut her off, my gaze fixed and unshakable. "Vanessa," I said, lowering my voice so only they could hear, "I don't recall you and Daniel offering me family ties when you were together in my bed 4 weeks before my wedding. My past life with you is completely irrelevant to me now." I turned to Alexander, taking his arm. "Darling, the Thorns are being requested by the co-sponsors. We should go." The shock and despair of Vanessa and Daniel were palpable. I left them there, paralyzed, their last hope of salvation dependent on the woman they betrayed and whose husband was the judge of their fortune. The slow climax had crushed their souls. Alexander Thorn and I walked away from Vanessa and Daniel, leaving them in a state of paralysis and horror. Thorn Holdings' need to make a final decision on Thomas's contract was the final nail in the coffin of their hope. Alexander looked at me, and I confirmed with a cold look what he already knew. Daniel's lack of character, exposed in his panic, was an unsustainable risk for Thorn Holdings. Alexander turned to Thomas, the tech entrepreneur, who was still trying to understand what was happening. Daniel and Vanessa rushed forward, desperate, trying to plead with their eyes. "Thomas," Alexander said, his voice calm and professional, the coldness of a CEO making a billion-dollar statement. "The technology project is innovative, but Thorn Holdings doesn't just invest in patents. We invest in integrity, and frankly, the team leads your intermediaries presented today demonstrated a lack of technical competence and, more importantly, a lack of managerial integrity that disqualifies the proposal. The ethical risk is too high." Daniel tried to interrupt, stammering, "But Mr. Thorn, I can answer. I'm the lawyer." Alexander completely ignored him, looking at Thomas. "The negotiation is over. I'm sorry about your project, Thomas, but the lack of character of your intermediaries is a liability we are not willing to assume." The sentence was final. Vanessa let out a muffled moan. Daniel turned white as a sheet. The billion-dollar contract, their last lifeline, crumbled in seconds. Financial and moral bankruptcy led to the collapse of the marriage. Vanessa, hysterical, turned on Daniel, her face contorted with hatred. "You useless idiot! You couldn't answer a simple question? You ruined this! You ruined my only chance!" Vanessa screamed, the sound loud and embarrassing in the middle of the gala. Daniel fought back. His cowardice turned into fury. "Your fault! If you hadn't dragged me onto the stage, if you hadn't shown off with Eliza, if you hadn't made me betray my original fiancé, we wouldn't be in this situation. I lost my ambition because of your greed. The fight became public. The murmurs of the other guests intensified. They pointed. The couple, who tried to fake status, was now self-destructing in the middle of the ballroom. The betrayal of 5 years ago had finally returned to haunt them. I watched the scene with a calmness that seemed supernatural. Alexander was by my side, holding my arm firmly. I didn't feel joy. I felt the cold satisfaction of justice. The punishment did not come from my hands. I didn't need to stoop to humiliate them. The punishment came from the weakness of their own character. Their marriage was a ticking time bomb, built on lies and greed. Time merely tightened the detonator. They destroyed each other the moment Vanessa's ambition crushed Daniel's mediocrity. My success was just the mirror that accelerated the explosion. I hadn't sought revenge, but fate gave me the best seat to the show. I looked at Alexander. He understood. I didn't need anything more. "Darling," I said, lowering my voice, "the show is over. Let's go." Alexander nodded. "With pleasure, Mrs. Thorne." We turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Vanessa and Daniel screaming at each other, humiliated and ruined, in the middle of the Metropolitan Museum ballroom. The contrast was total. The successful couple withdrew to a future of power. The treacherous couple remained behind, without a future and without dignity. As Alexander Thorne and I walked out of the Metropolitan Museum ballroom, the scene we left behind was one of total collapse. Vanessa and Daniel were kneeling on the marble floor, their fight turning into a depressing attraction for the waiters and security guards. They were lost, ruined, and ignored by the world they were desperately trying to impress. Their abandonment was my true victory. No one cared to help them. The couple who stole my future was reduced to social irrelevance. They lost the contract, the respect, and the last shred of status. I watched their collapse. Their fight was about the ring they would never have and the contract they never deserved. I realized that the punishment was not what Alexander did, but what they became. They would never prosper because their success was built on betrayal. Time does not bring revenge. It exposes character. Reaching the safety of our penthouse, the silence was profound. The opulence of our home was a stark contrast to the misery we had just witnessed. Alexander poured 2 glasses of whiskey. I sat down and with a long, liberating sigh, took off my coat. I looked at the diamond ring on my finger. I walked over to the mirror and in a gesture that felt like closing a cycle, took off the thorn ring. Alexander, who had been watching, asked, his voice low and laden with understanding, "Why the ring? Why expose yourself like that, Eliza? You completely destroyed them." I saw the panic in her eyes. I held the ring in the palm of my hand, observing its sparkle. I knew Alexander was asking about my soul, not my plan. "I had to do it, Alexander," I explained, my voice firm and clear. "Not for the money and not for the ring they stole. My first ring was a lie. Yours is the truth. But I had to go back and show them and myself that betrayal has a real cost. I had to show Vanessa that my dignity was worth more than the wedding she stole. When Daniel abandoned me, he said I was too ambitious and too cold for him. I had to prove that my ambition would take me to a level he would never reach, and that coldness was the only thing that would save me. I put the thorn ring back on my finger, but this time I did it for myself. I am not the victim, Alexander. I am the owner. And the dignity of the betrayed girl was worth more than the wedding they stole." Alexander smiled. It wasn't the smile of a husband, but the smile of a partner whose trust had just been cemented. "You didn't need my ring to have dignity, Eliza. You built it with Aelful consult. But I understand your cost." He took my hand and kissed it with deep respect. Thorn Holdings has many future contracts, Eliza, and many intermediaries who tried to steal and cheat. To ensure we are never betrayed by a Daniel or Vanessa again, I give you total authority over all future real estate contracts. You are my partner and my judge. You have the best judgment of character. The billionaire CEO had handed the key to his empire to the wife he trusted the most. The revenge was complete, and Eliza's dignity was restored in an unbeatable way.
The night deepened over New York, and the story of Eliza, Vanessa, and Daniel found its conclusion. They had become irrelevant. I had the power, the love, and, most importantly, my restored dignity. The fate of Vanessa and Daniel is a relentless reminder that success built on envy and betrayal is inherently unsustainable. They stole a fiancé and a wedding, but they failed to steal the character or ambition that creates real wealth. Time did not bring vengeance, it merely exposed what was always there: Daniel's mediocrity and Vanessa's destructive greed. Eliza's triumph was not a financial victory, but a moral victory. She proved that even after the most painful betrayal, focus, integrity, and building one's own legacy are the true forms of wealth, immune to theft and deceit. Vanessa and Daniel's failure was the real cost of their own lack of character. Eliza's story is a tale of justice, but the way it was served raises a question. Do you think Eliza's revenge was fair? Should she have been content with her own success and ignored the traitors? Or was she right to use her position and her husband, Alexander Thorne, to bring down Vanessa and Daniel in such a public and humiliating way? Should she have sought revenge so publicly, risking her own status in the name of justice? Leave your honest comment below and share your opinion. Did Eliza's success justify the price of her sister's ruin, or was betrayal the only punishment they understood? If this epic story of betrayal, relentless karma, and the triumph of dignity touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like so we can continue to explore the compelling stories that fate, character, and ambition have in store for us. Thank you for watching.